Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, September 27th, 2017. My name is Michael Brooks. My name is Michael Wednesday. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Sean Illing of Vox joins us to discuss the deeper implications of Trump's war with the NFL, sports and resistance, and what the alt-right gets wrong about philosophy, Nietzsche specifically. Graham and Cassidy say that their bill is dead, but as we keep saying, it's only a temporary reprieve. As long as Republicans are in power, they are going to destroy all of the gains of Obamacare, no matter how modest, to fund tax breaks for the rich. Donald Trump has used a crisis in Puerto Rico to say that they should pay off their debts to banks in that colonized, austerity-ravaged island. And he also has some interesting insights on Puerto Rico's geography. Roy Moore defeated Luther Strange as the Republican nominee for Senate in Alabama. Touch on that. What did Donald Trump do in response to his preferred candidate losing? Stanley Greenberg's assessment of the core areas that the Clinton campaign missed, some specific to her, some reflecting a broader problem in the Democratic coalition. We'll reflect on that. And new ABC polls shockingly show overwhelming opposition to tax giveaways to rich people, the heart of the Republican agenda. Sean Hannity looking very displeased with life on some satellite footage. Play that for you. And Jim Baker, those food buckets apparently are not selling fast enough, so they've got to uptick the marketing strategy, shifting from a staying alive sales tactic to a going to hell sales tactic.
Sort of paternalistic feed that if you're rich, just buy a bunch of these buckets and feed people.
Buy a bunch of these buckets and feed people. It's pretty simple. All the money's going to go anyways, which wonder why Jim Baker needs it so much then. All that and more on today's Majority Report, joined as always by super producer Matt Leck. We're going to get to Sean Illing in a moment, but this was Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy yesterday announcing that for now, their attack on Medicaid and people with pre-existing conditions is in temporary retreat.
I've been up here 20 years. I've never enjoyed anything more. I believe this is the most important thing I can ever do for the country, working with my colleagues, is not to just repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with a system closer to where you live, controlled by people you can vote for. And we're going to get there. To my Republican colleagues, we're going to fulfill our promise to repeal and replace. To the American people, we're going to improve health care for you, because at the end of the day, that's the only promise that matters.
Well, to be clear, through events that are under our control and not under our control, we don't have the votes. Okay? That's in speaking to the leadership, speaking to the president. I think Lindsey and he are on speed dial. we've made the decision, since we don't have the votes, we will postpone that vote. Okay?
Okay, so there you have it. They're obviously still gunning for it. These different hustles and side deals haven't worked yet. There was even question about the constitutionality of essentially offering Lisa Murkowski a Obamacare Plus for Alaska specifically. Susan Collins is still a firm no in spite of the bribes that they tried to give Maine. And John McCain, frankly, just would have looked ridiculous if he went back on his vote against it on procedural grounds. There's no doubt they're getting calls from their top donors about this. Major tantrums from the plutocrats that run the Republican Party and want to take your health care away to give more money to themselves. This is alive. It also needs to be destroyed to fund generation-defining entrenchment of inequality in terms of Republican massive tax giveaways. So I would say keep calling and stay on and just be relentless, energy, because these people are going to keep trying, whether it's, an extreme fanatical ideology, doing favors for their donors, whatever it is, they're still gunning for the well-being of the country and to take away tens of millions of people's health coverage and to put people with pre-existing conditions back on the margins of even private health insurance. That's the goal. They're not going to stop. Last night, I had a great Michael Brooks show. More people reaching out who are just checking in. We did a kind of deep dive on Germany, India, the global far right with Corey Pine. Then Matt Christman came in. We had an extended takedown of Steven Crowder. I did an analysis of Bernie Sanders' foreign policy in the commentary. And Nation of Islam, Obama called Mark Zuckerberg. And then there was an internal monologue from Maoist Bernie. This weekend on the Illicit History, Adam Proctor and I are talking about a coup d'etat that happened in Williamton, North Carolina in 1898 and how that re-entrenched Jim Crow and disrupted an incredibly important sort of progress in actual multiracial governance during Reconstruction and tied it to some of the conflicts of capital and race that we see today. If you haven't checked it out yet, check it out on Michael Brooks Show playlist on the Sam Seder channel, or subscribe to Michael Brooks Show on iTunes. And of course, we're at 665 patrons. Become a patron, get the whole thing, get a ton extra as a patron. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thank you everybody else who's been becoming a patron, subscribing, sharing it. We're getting a lot of energy and a lot of good feedback. I appreciate it immensely. And I appreciate Matt for helping me make it happen. And, that's how we're able to do it and pay all the bills. Thanks a million. We'll be right back with Sean Ealing on the Majority Report. Welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Sean Ealing from Vox. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing well, buddy. It's good to be back.
It's great to be talking with you. This is long delayed and finally happening. It's great to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, it's you're right, man. It has been a while, so it's good to chat, man.
As always, Sean, I want your take. You're someone you're writing at Vox. I always appreciate looking at because you have space to take a wider view, whether it's philosophical, political, historical, legal, economic. One of the things that I mean, I think as a first order, it's vital that the origins of the NFL protests and this whole controversy not get lost, which is Colin Kaepernick at obvious, incredible personal risk was taking a knee to address systemic racism, murder, police abuse of people of color. That's the issue. It's not a sort of dispute about Trump being a jerk. I want that not to be lost. But I also think there's even a deeper history here of sports and resistance and race. And, you know, when Trump says, get a son of a bitch back out on the field, it's not just, you know, his, you know, being his sort of usual horrible melted brain self. He's tapping into, as he usually does with race, into a very ugly history there.
Right. And this is part of what's so frustrating about this, right, is it's clear what Trump is doing. This is his shtick, right? He picks an issue like this, which is really a non-issue issue that will charge up his cultural base, but which has really nothing to do or makes no material impact on the people who voted for him and on their lives, right? It's pure red meat. And we in the media are forced to sort of chase it like a greyhound because he just, you know, drops the turd on the table and now we have to address it. Right. But, I mean, so there's that, right? And then there's just sort of the fraudulence of the outrage on the other side, right? All these people caping up for the American flag and for the national anthem. You would think all these millions of people exercised about this would be overseas fighting to defend that sacred symbol that they so adore, and yet they're so charged up about this. And, you know, look, I say this as a veteran. You take an oath to defend the Constitution, not the damn flag or the anthem. Right. And free men and women protesting is an affirmation of the Constitution. And so anyone who objects to that is constitutionally ignorant and really charged up about something else that has nothing to do with these symbols. It's, as always with Trump, about culture and race and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and isn't it really important now? I mean, there's these debates, you know, that are alive. I think, frankly, my editorial, I think a lot of them are pretty misdirected and pretty trivial. You know, I'm very unimpressed by Mark Lilla's book as an example. And then I also think that there is a deployment of a certain type of identity politics, which I have profound disagreement with. But it just seems to me that it's amazing that even with all of the sort of focus on Trump and this way that, and let's be clear too, that this is the modern Republican Party. It's definitely not just Trump, but he does it with less subtext. But that this notion of white identity politics isn't just firmly in the vernacular now, because that's really what it is.
No, and there's really no getting around it now. I mean, it's not, I mean, the sorts of issues that Trump takes and the moments he chooses to take a stand are so carefully calibrated to tap in to all these sort of cultural anxieties and racial resentments that at some point it's just impossible to deny that there's a reason and a method to it, that it's not just, he's not just tripping on a banana peel and stumbling into these racial landmines, right? Like, he's clearly deciding to poke these or pull these levers that are going to sort of divide the country along these racial fault lines. And he's doing it deliberately, and he's doing it because it's really the only play in his playbook, right? What the hell is he going to do? Is he going to talk about healthcare policy or tax cuts or North Korea? I mean, other than tweeting about
well,
these
he
things,
sure
he
will
doesn't
tweet
have
about
anything to
North
say.
Korea, right? And
Yeah,
I think when he does talk about that stuff, I think what's very evident is that all of this stuff, you know, what was odd about Trump was that where he was effective in the Republican primary was that he dropped the pretext and said did overt misogyny, did overt bigotry, did overt xenophobia, and then at the same time actually, and he was lying and hustling, but gave a more honest economic appraisal than any modern Republican has done for people that aren't ultra wealthy. And he did that with talking about trade agreements, talking about preserving Social Security and Medicare. Now, and so the kind of question was, and you know, for me, I had no doubt, I don't think you had any doubt that the kind of economic hustle would get thrown out quickly. But how does those two strands get reconciled? And what it has become, and what it was, again, even before Trump, is that when he is talking about healthcare, or he is talking about North Korea, or he's talking about global warming, or whatever, it might as well be him racializing and throwing red meat about the NFL, because it's all just cultural aggrievement. That's all it is, even if it is policy, quote unquote.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think those strands don't get reconciled, and I think that's the point, right? I think the fact that those are the two pillars of his campaign, and the fact that as soon as he gets elected, he basically abandons one of them entirely, right? Surrounds himself with Goldman Sachs bankers and wants to slash healthcare for millions of people. But he continues to toe the line on the racial resentment front, right? And his voters haven't left him. His core, his base, they aren't going anywhere. They're still solidly in his camp. So that tells you all you need to know about what matters most to a lot of these people.
That's exactly right. Now, and before we get to this alt-right thing, do you think moving forward, and there are ways in which Trump is obviously, bad seed, singular entity, just this sort of, he is a uniquely grotesque figure. But at the same time, there's a formula here that he's developed, which I don't think took really particularly deep insight about understanding the modern nature of the Republican Party to tap into. And, you look to the future, and whether you're talking about, a Tom Cotton or, Ted Cruz obviously wants to stay on the national radar. These characters, how do you see the next phase of Trumpism? Because I just don't think there's any doubt that even if he loses re-election, pray to Allah, that this still is the formula of a modern Republican coalition. This is where the potency is. There's no other figure. Paul Ryan, Mike Pence, nobody who's got the pop that this guy has with the base. Part of it's attitudinal, but it is also that fusion of faking on economics and being overt on bigotry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I don't think anyone really knows what comes next. But I think it's pretty clear to me that Trumpism doesn't need Trump. Right? That all this stuff has been festering in the body politic for a very long time. And as you said, he just cut the bullshit, right? And just came clean and was completely naked about what he was doing, dropped the subtext, and it clearly worked, right? And so now that cat's out of the bag, and I don't know how you put it back in, right? Even if Trump goes away in 3 years or 4 years or whatever, right? Like, he has laid down a blueprint for how to exercise these parts of the base. And so why wouldn't somebody follow in his footsteps and do the same thing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You are a trained philosopher.
Whatever that means, right?
Whatever that, well, I guess Marco Rubio would have beef with that. I remember when he had some doing his the idea of people reading Plato or whatever made his mouth get really dry. But like everything else. But you have this piece where you kind of dipped your toe into the more sort of deeply pretentious recesses of the kind of hard alt-right. And if we're going to make a somewhat of a distinction between the kind of the Mike Cernovich, Alex Jones kind of freak show Twitter, YouTube universe alt-right, which obviously is fueled by the same kind of conspiracy theories and racial demagoguery and sexism and everything else, but is fundamentally kind of social media entertainment product kind of scams and hustles and that sort of thing.
Right.
But then there are these other sort of grotesque strand of Richard Spencer or Giorgiani, these people that fancy themselves as very deep thinkers. And like a lot of other unpleasant young men who fancy themselves deep thinkers, they've found a German philosopher that has a notorious name and have chosen to misread him. And I leave that, take it from there.
Well, look, racist assholes are annoying enough, but when racist assholes invoke all these fancy philosophical authorities in order to justify their racism, well, that's even more annoying.
Right.
And that is what has happened with Nietzsche, right? That's a name everyone knows, but not that many people have actually read him, and a lot of the people that have read him very superficially. And so I wrote that piece. In college, I wrote a dissertation about Nietzsche, which probably has no practical utility in the world. But this was one moment where it actually seemed useful to opine, right? And I saw this great Atlantic piece a while back that Graham Wood did, where it was kind of a profile of Richard Spencer, right? And he had said that he was, red-pilled by Nietzsche, right? Red-pilled is the stupid phrase they use to describe their big aha, eureka moment when they finally see the world as it really is.
Right.
And so he's this, philosophical grandfather of their movement. And much like the Nazis, I think, also falsely invoked Nietzsche. But the problem is that it doesn't make any sense, right? And so, the alt-right, before it became sort of explicitly white supremacist, it was this sort of fringe online discursive movement that was about, kind of poking holes in taboos and being transgressive and ironical and all that silly shit. And
right, exactly.
They found, but if you read Nietzsche, right, he says all this stuff about how conventions and taboos and values are basically contingent and bullshit, and these are constructs, and you don't have to believe them. You can transcend them, and blah blah blah. And so they find all that exciting, right? But but they then, what the next move that Nietzsche makes is to tell people to throw out all that stuff. Don't retreat into group identity. Don't retreat into religion. Don't retreat into the herd, as he calls it, and just replace your identity with some other one. And that's what these people do, right? They have this weird fascination with Christendom, but they're not. But they're atheists. They're not Christians, but they're attached to Christendom because they think that's sort of the glue that holds together like white European identity. And so they want to defend Christendom, but they don't identify as religious in any way, right? Which is completely antithetical to Nietzsche's philosophy. And so I just took an opportunity to sort of call out their bullshit and the contradictions at the core of their kind of pseudo half-baked philosophy. And of course, you never miss an opportunity to poke at Richard Spencer, who's just sort of the king douchebag of that movement.
Right. And so basically what Nietzsche was saying was that there was that these classical, and he did idealize these kind of like romantic, or he would say classical Greek kind of values of individuality, vitality, breaking conventions, individual sense of accomplishment, and then that Christendom, and ironically in Nietzsche's formulation, Christianity came in as this like force of mediocrity and broke culture down to the lowest common denominator. But I guess it's not, but that he didn't just say don't replace one group identity with another. He also, his conception, even of that kind of classic individualist framework for Nietzsche, was not like the equivalent of some like dumb Ayn Rand fantasy about building a building. It really maybe had more to do with, I don't know, somebody doing something sort of like radically unconventional. It might even be like somebody deciding to like, I don't know, go to the Himalayas or something and become a yogi or something. Like actually something like that might be more in line with that Nietzschean impulse than either, win a capitalist game or certainly trade in one silly Twitter identity for another.
Right. I mean, Nietzsche's biggest fear was that in the 20th century, as people stopped believing in God, that they would sort of retreat into ethno-identity or political ideology, like basically just replace a theological religion with a political religion or with a racial religion. And that was just replacing one type of error with another, right? And so the whole point of his philosophy was to enjoin people to go their own way, to be individuals, to make their own values, right? And to not just disappear into another kind of ideology. And that's exactly what the alt-right has done, become a kind of ethno religion, which is explicitly what Nietzsche condemned. And so, I mean, it's absurd. They're not serious readers of Nietzsche or anyone for that matter. They're just looking for excuses for their bullshit racism when it's just racism. It's not Nietzsche, it's not philosophy, it's just racism.
Right, absolutely. So why, really briefly, why is Nietzsche susceptible to these idiots? What is it about Nietzsche that draws the worst, even when he's not exactly articulating that himself?
Well, you ask Nietzsche scholars, you'll get a different answer. I mean, my answer is in part because of the way he wrote. Right? He wrote in contradictions, he wrote in puzzles. Part of his whole point was that nothing is really capital T true, and so you shouldn't wed yourself to some viewpoint or some ideology and then spend the rest of your life defending it. And so he took all kinds of positions. He contradicts himself from one book to another, and his whole point was that you should experiment, try to see the world from different points of view, but never take it too seriously, because on a long enough timeline, it's all bullshit anyway. and so he does write in a way where almost everyone can, if you just dip into Nietzsche for a page or two, you could pluck something and find a justification for almost anything. But if you read him in his totality, you see his broader point, which is that none of it is really true, and you shouldn't take any of it that seriously.
Final question. I know you have to run, but I mean, has there been, you not only sort of schooled them on Nietzsche and sort of, I think in some ways, especially for some of these characters like Spencer, there could be nothing more upsetting for them. You know, when we kind of morally respond to them for their grotesque positions and the genocidal implications and practice of what they advocate, they love that because that plays into their self-concept. But when they're mocked and ridiculed and stripped naked in terms of their just basic intellectual mediocrity, I would imagine that makes them deeply uncomfortable, because this is the whole, ego game they're playing. So has there been a response, or have they just tried to ignore you, or what?
I was actually surprised. It's been mostly radio silence. Look, you always get the initial wave of asinine emails, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I never heard a peep from Spencer. I never heard a peep from any of the sort of, major, pseudo thinkers on the alt-right. No one really responded to the piece in print, as far as I know of. Maybe someone did in some, far-fledged corner of the interweb. I don't know. But for the most part, I haven't heard much of anything. So I take that as a minor victory, my friend.
Well, I love it. It's a great piece. Everybody should read it, and all of Sean Ealing's work. Sean Ealing, you can find him over at Vox. I appreciate your time so much, man. Thanks so much.
Anytime, buddy. Talk soon.
Absolutely. Take care. All right, folks. That was obviously a touch short, so we're going to go to the fun half in just a moment. But let's just...
It's like a nice little In Our Time segment on Nietzsche there.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of hoping we would do. I mean, there's a lot to take advantage of with Sean, because, not many people have such a kind of broad base to draw on and sort of day in, day out political analysis. So if it's an opportunity to give a nice little tutorial on Nietzsche, I think that's useful for everybody. Let's just play this, and then we'll do the kind of closing spiel. There is a crisis. I mean, Puerto Rico is devastated right now. And still many people without electricity, places to stay. Donald Trump took to Twitter the other day and talked about Puerto Rico paying off its debts, which it's so morally wrong-headed in the longer sweep of American history and colonial occupation in Puerto Rico, and state-imposed austerity and economic disadvantage imposed on the island, and the quasi-status of not being independent, obviously not being a full state, taxed without representation, serving in the armed forces but not being able to determine who's president. It's grotesque. And as with Trump, there is the grotesque, and then there is just the, very dumb. Here he was with the dumb angle on Puerto Rico.
Texas and on Florida. And we will also on Puerto Rico. But the difference is this is an island sitting in the middle of an ocean. And it's a big ocean. It's a very big ocean. And we're doing a really good job. I want to...
So there you have it.
He understands the gravity of the moment.
He clearly understands the gravity of the moment. All right, everybody, we're going to go to the fun half. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. That's how it's all possible. New people, new things are happening soon. Really, really excited about this show that we do for you every day. And you are the ones that make it possible. So majority.fm/become a member. Majority Report kickback page. Use our pass-through links. You're going to do shopping on those particular websites. And write us an iTunes review. Of course, if you want to find more from me, Patreon/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on iTunes, Michael Brooks Show playlist on YouTube, 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. The IMs are on. We'll see you in the fun half.
All the time. She said no, 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 like to speak my mind. She said no, 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 and I know her time's not free. She didn't waste none on me. Situation sad. She said no, 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 things are looking bad. She said no, 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 and if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. Every time I see her look my way, I don't know, girl, what to say. Situation sad. She said no, 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 things are looking bad. She said no, 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 and if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. No, no, no.
Welcome to the fun half. Michael Brooks. Let's go straight to the phones. You're calling from a 518 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Sorry, 518. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello? You're on the air.
Okay. I'm not 518. I'm actually calling in from Germany to get to give you some context to about the elections that just happened.
Okay, cool. It says 518, but whatever. Great. Yeah, please tell me. Tell us.
Yeah. It's okay. So it's a really long story, and I could go into detail because I've been like an anti-fascist activist for 20 years now.
Oh wow. Okay.
So but just to give you like the contemporary context, it's not surprising because you have a sociologist from Germany called Heidmeier. Did some regular studies about basically authoritarianism, xenophobia within the population. So it's supposed to be a representative sample of the German population, and what he found was about a third to 20% people who have like a close-minded, authoritarian, xenophobic, sexist, hard-right view on things, and those views can be found out like throughout the last 20 years since the study has been done. That has been pretty constant. So there is like a potential there. But what's specific about Germany is because of its past, the Shoah and all that stuff, those people were kind of hidden within the normal parties, and they weren't, they didn't have the guts to come out as anti-Semitic, as racist, as authoritarian as they really are. And now they have been emboldened by, basically the alt-right in other countries. And there is like a global alt-right that is different from the old school German Nazis. The old school German Nazis, for example, were not climate change deniers because their line was protecting the environment is protecting the homeland. And that's where the the Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, is different, because they're climate change deniers. They came from like libertarian people. They have libertarian economic views, and they combine them. They're basically Nazis without the socialist part. Basically, they just want everything. Yeah, and yeah,
so
there's been like a rise.
Just I'm curious about this, because it seems like, particularly in Europe, that is the fault line between these different parties. So the in France, the National Front does still, it fuses its Nazi legacy and its xenophobia with a commitment to preserving the French system, and that's obviously highly racialized and not for immigrants and everything else, but there's that kind of dual argument. There's that fusion of xenophobia, but also opposition to austerity and international neoliberal economics. But then in Germany, alternative for Deutschland would be, the politics would be. So in Germany, and I just want to give people a kind of template. So if there's Angela Merkel, Christian Democrats, that's the center-right party. Then Social Democrats, center-left. Then you have a actual left party. Then you have the Free Democrats, which are socially liberal but extreme on economics. And then the Greens, which are actually more of a kind of centrist party. That would be my read. But that the alternative for Deutschland, they're basically, what they're appealing to is the people in the Christian Democrats that hate the sort of moderation on social issues, some disaffected voters from Social Democrats on immigration, some, and then a Free Democrat agenda just with fused with bigotry. And I mean, and while we're on that, I mean, tell me whether that's right or not, but are they like pro-marriage equality and pro-choice, or are they socially reactive on that as well?
Well, they're split, or that they don't really dare to come out like that, because homophobia really doesn't play well in Germany nowadays. But on the other hand, lots of people are saying there's like a gayification of Germany going on. It's like a bit of the liberal cuck meme in the German context. So basically there's like this red-green gayification of Germany going on that has them riled up, basically. And but on the other hand, they have like one of their major candidates is a lesbian herself, out lesbian. So they're not really sure how far they can go with that. There's some subset of people who are like sexually repressed, hate people, but not that many. Most are like not that many workers, basically, but like well-off people who are not really that educated, like similar to the like the small business owner asshole who votes for Trump, basically.
Right. And how connected is
that's,
it? How connected are no? How connected are they with, to the extent that it's even possible? But we have this question here of like, what are the connections between the Trump administration and the alt-right, and then on a further continuum, the resurgence of groups like the Ku Klux Klan, these other fascist terrorist groups. To the extent that Germany still has, and I know it's more difficult because of speech laws, but, a skinhead movement, a kind of street neo-Nazi movement, are there connections between that party and those more kind of on the street elements, or are they clearly differentiating, at least in terms of their presentation and connections?
It's a mixed bag. There are some connections, but they try to disavow them. The most telling connection is the one to like an Alex Jones type alt-right media. We have like basically an Alex Jones type conspiracy magazine, which was launched like I think 6 years ago. It's called Compact Magazine, and that's like basically conspiracy theory and all basically Alex Jones in the German context as a magazine. And then we have like a newspaper that also like carries water for them but won't admit it. It's like our Fox newspaper basically. It's called Bild-Zeitung, and that's like basically Fox News in print in the German context. And those two like shifted the whole discourse to the right. And then we had like on the streets elements where there was like a convergence of all those people. There were the conspiracy nutcases, the conspiracy anti-Semite nutcases, the far-right Nazis, and those libertarians in the streets together under the name Pegida. That's patriotic Europeans against the Islamization of the Occident. Basically, that's what that is shorthand for that. And yeah, those demonstrations have been going on, getting smaller, but going on for like 3 to 4 to 5 years now, basically every Monday, especially in Eastern Germany. There's like, Germany has a similar dynamic that you have with the, with the American South and the American North in terms of economics, because the German East is basically, not able to compete with the West, since the Eastern Bloc failed because it wasn't able to compete with the West in terms of productivity and stuff like that, and it didn't really pay off to really bring the East up to speed. So there's basically a lot of abandoned country where people have no economic future perspective, because it would be very costly to get production there up to speed, basically. And so there is a lot of resentment there, and the center right or the center left haven't really done anything economically in spite of all this suffering taking. Well, suffering is a bit much if you look at the rest of the world. But in spite of all that taking place, they've basically always gone with austerity. Like the Schröder SPD was quite similar to Clinton in your country.
That was a government. Just to tell people, there was a government before Angela Merkel. There was a red-green coalition that ran Germany. I believe it was from 1998 to 2005, with Gerhard Schröder, who's the chancellor from the Social Democratic Party. And at the time, I mean, and again, I did a primer on this for my show on the Third Way, but at the time, this was a global movement in some respects, or at least a global top-up movement. Blair, Clinton, Schroeder, Cardozo in Brazil, and several others. Right. And it gave people a kind of, these neoliberal center governments, a kind of blueprint for certain types of limited social investments in basically capacity training for people to meet the demands of a tech economy, slashing the respective countries' welfare systems, which meant very different things in different contexts. Obviously, in America, much more savage because we barely have one to begin with. In Germany, even after the cuts, it would still be enviable from a U.S. perspective. But in a German context, real austerity, and then kind of moves towards, the sort of more kind of hip capitalism, which was the flavor of the world in the kind of late 90s and early aughts. And so the Social Democratic Party under Schroeder was really remolded in that image. And then they went into coalition with Merkel, as far as I understand, which has been another difficult aspect for them because the candidate that just ran, Martin Schulz, to some extent was trying to sort of reclaim an anti-austerity social democratic mantle, but it was difficult because Social Democrats have been governing in partnership with Merkel for a while, for I think 2 parliaments now. So yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't only been difficult because of that, but the whole Schroeder people, the whole lowering the top earners tax rate, deregulating the financial markets, basically having what in Germany was new, having people who are unemployed more than 1 year, they have to take any job for like $1 an hour.
Right.
So basically, what they did is lower German wages so much that the rest of Europe couldn't compete, and that's like another whole layer where they invoked racism against Southern Europe within the financial crisis, basically slaughtering them and benefiting from the currency enormously because Germany was more industrialized and had a higher standard of productivity, and there was some room for the wages to decrease. But what that meant was that the deficits that the whole European Union had with China and with the US for some part were exported from Germany to Southern Europe. So all the deficits would accrue in Southern Europe, and the people would suffer more and more vicious austerity. And in Germany, they would say, no, we're not paying for those lazy Southerners, basically. And that was like a campaign that really made the bed. I blame Germany in a great part for like destroying the European Union in terms of its ideologic baseline. Okay.
Yeah. No, and that was really where Merkel had a great fusion of. There's no contradiction between the austerity neoliberalism and then her playing to her right-wing xenophobic base by demonizing normal, average Greek citizens as an example, literally devastating them, hollowing them out, practicing economic terrorism, and then coming home and actually, demonizing them in the same way that you might hear a typical politician here. Race bait people from Latin America. This is a similar dynamic. So
exactly.
Final question. And before you sign off, please say your name again because this has been like an amazing mini interview. So I appreciate your time. What kind of coalition will take? What do you think the next coalition will be that takes over governance?
I would place my bet on the Jamaica coalition, which, as you said in your program last week, is really not as fun as it sounds. Right. Basically, the Greens going more and more libertarian, and what you would expect maybe from Jamaica legalizing marijuana, that's off. That's not happening. Right. But that was a Green issue. Basically, I think the Greens are going to try to get some environmental policies in and basically giving up all their the social beneficiary welfare profile that they have left. That's basically going to be all gone. And that's like the best case scenario now. The worst case scenario would be re-elections, and as far as I would assume, that would increase chances of the Alternative für Deutschland to get even more votes.
And just to be clear to people, it would be Jamaica because it would also include that Libertarian Free Democrats Party. So what it is it's the blue, yellow, and green, and that's yes.
It's basically yellow. Black and
yellow, black,
green.
Yeah, excuse me. The Christian Democrats being black, right?
Yeah. In Germany, if somebody says I hate blacks, you have to ask if they mean the party or the people.
Well, wow. Yeah. And so all of a sudden you're either meeting a horrible person or a cool person. All right. I appreciate it. And what's your name again, please?
Jacob.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jacob. That was very helpful. Thank you. Look at that. the level of calls
Yeah,
that
that
we
was
get on the Majority Report, man. Come on.
It's like a second interview.
It really was. With just some smart guy calling in from Germany who's listening. That's great.
20 years of anti-fascist experience.
With 20 years, a veteran anti-fascist campaigner in Germany. It's great. Let's get to a little bit more sound. Donald Trump, of course. Sarah Huckabee, we saw her spin on this yesterday. They said, how does he have time in a world of North Korea and healthcare to harass NFL players? I never liked those framing of those questions because, frankly, I mean, now because of the racism that drives it, obviously, the sports thing is not trivial. But I like, if Donald Trump spent 4 years harassing like Arnold Schwarzenegger for failing at the Apprentice ratings instead of talking about North Korea, I think that would be one of the least damaging scenarios imaginable for this fucking mental case.
Just create a Truman Show style presidency where he deals with fake things all day.
Honestly, the best strategy, we either want to call it a Truman Show presidency or in 30 Rock when Tracy Morgan thought he was really on a rocket, whatever you want to occupy this idiot. And I agree with Sean. There's a paradox. He's a total moron, but he has a real instinct for racism. I mean, think of one of the only altruistic, I forget maybe who was, I don't remember who was making this point, but like one of the only things that Donald Trump ever did that was like not either a one-to-one he got something when he put something forward or just straight up like ripping somebody else off was putting an op-ed in the paper about the Central Park Five. That apparently the check cleared and he got that message out there.
And that wasn't counterpunching.
No, that was not counter. That wasn't. The Central Park didn't say something bad about me, so I said something bad about them.
I just don't like black kids.
I just don't like black kids. And he never apologized about it, even though they were completely exonerated. So his North Stars are obviously, grotesque, narcissism and everything, narcissism and being a horrific human. And part and parcel of that is obviously his misogyny and his racism. So that is the NFL thing. And here he is, taking the same question that Sarah Huckabee had about how he uses his time and harassing NFL players. And there's some pretty fun tells in this one.
Well, I wasn't preoccupied with the NFL. I was ashamed of what was taking place because to me that was a very important moment. I don't think you can disrespect our country, our flag, our national anthem. To me, the NFL situation is a very important situation. I've heard that before about was I preoccupied. Not at all. Not at all. I have plenty of time on my hands. All I do is work. And to be honest with you, that's an important function of working. It's called respect for our country. Many people have died. Many, many people. Many people are so horribly injured. I was at Walter Reed Hospital recently, and I saw so many great young people, and they're missing legs, and they're missing arms, and they've been so badly injured. And they were fighting for our country. They were fighting for our flag. They were fighting for our national anthem.
3 steps there.
And for people to disrespect that by kneeling during the playing of our national anthem, I think is disgraceful. It doesn't take me long to put out a wrong, and maybe we'll get it right. I think it's a very important thing for the NFL to not allow people to kneel during the playing of our national anthem, to respect our country and to respect our flag.
I have all the time in the world. I work all the time. I've got nothing but time because I'm always working.
To do all this work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I had a clear time in my schedule for working, I mean.
Yeah, it's not just clear, open workspace.
Clear time to sit where Fox and Friends is on,
yeah,
which is work.
That's work. I just, when you think, get to some of this in a second about, we'll just say this Sean Ealing, military veteran, he said, I'm fighting for the Constitution, not a flag, not a song. Also, other people are fighting because their economic circumstances force them, essentially, to risk their lives. There's a lot of reasons that people are fighting. And then, it does strike me, like, what, and I know I discussed with Bhaskar the problems I have and he had with the Ta-Nehisi Coates piece about Trump. And you can look that up if you're interested. I won't get into all of it now. But his existence is such a walking insult to everybody that has had to do anything to get where they are in any capacity. And just the notion that, like, you know, I mean, on a very, like, take just like a kid that needed to, like, get loans and, you know, work through college and actually do something, right? And this guy being the position of president is just offensive. And then you think about, you know, Barack Obama just as a cultural force and a guy who was, you know, everything that we supposedly would ask of these of what in some ways is both obviously CEO and an incredibly empowered chief executive, but then also in some respects holds a, you know, cultural and ceremonial role. I mean, just a guy was like, you know, hey, Barack wore like a suit that was disrespectful at that press briefing, or he needs to chew Nicorette gum, or, you know, it's like this guy is like relentlessly, he's intelligent, he's self-made, he's articulate, he's got a great family, he never, you know, he's like deals with constant bullshit and disrespect and racism and keeps his cool. It just goes and goes and goes, and then also has way more, I think, in many ways, misplaced trust in some American meritocratic mythology than like anybody. And he does it, and he pulls it together, and just this incredible historic triumph in the context of this society of being the first black president. And then it's just followed up by a guy who's just like, maybe I talked about wanting to fuck my daughter on like Star Jones's show. And like, Vodka's a total piece of ass, Howard. And by the way, those son of a bitches should get on the field and show a little bit of respect. I mean, it's just, he talks about respect. The very actuality of this fucking guy's existence is disrespect to every person of color in this country, to every woman in this country, to everybody who's ever had to work for anything. This scumbag, trust fund baby, unethical, dishonest, scamster, racist, xenophobic, stupid, arrogant, insecure, unstable. I mean, he has multiple sub-personalities, and they're all horrible. It's just, I mean, I don't indulge in much of this, and I try not to, like, overhype the Trump personality. And obviously, I've always found, particularly when he's, you know, dunking on a Lindsey Graham like he did in the primaries, and stuff he said about Iraq was great, and he totally can be funny. But there are those moments, especially when he's going to go after someone like Colin Kaepernick, who demonstrates, you know, Colin Kaepernick is just a superior human specimen by every conceivable metric. And this asshole, who doesn't like belong managing like a chain of regional restaurants, is on TV using the fucking presidential seal to essentially say, hey, get out there and play, boy. It's just disgusting. It's so disgusting. It's such an insult. Anyway. Get off my high horse. But it really is. It's fucking disgusting. You're calling from an 831 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 831. Are you there? Try back. You're calling from a 847 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Sam. I'm calling from the beach, and I have my Social Security report.
Yes.
In this report, it says the latest actuarial table is wrong. I told Mila this, but she wouldn't listen.
I like that Sam is also cracking, like he's going through puberty.
It's my funny addition. I just wanted to talk about the NFL thing.
The what? The NFL? Sure, go ahead.
So first of all, on Sunday, probably the highest profile white player took a knee.
Right.
I don't know if you knew this.
Mm-hmm.
So Travis Kelce, who is maybe the best tight end in football.
I don't know if he's the most high-profile player, dude. I think you're forgetting
Gronkowski.
Tom Brady. I wasn't even going to go there. But anyways.
You mean most? You mean in terms of like he during the actual anthem?
On
Did
Sunday,
he? Yeah.
in the game.
Wait, did he do it during the actual anthem though?
Yes.
Okay.
And he actually, I believe his girlfriend is African American. And he didn't. He's tweeted stuff in the past about like Black Lives Matter and basically about how horrible Trump is. But so I think that's like just like a big deal in terms of like the fact that it's such a high profile player doing it.
Right.
But like I'd also add the thing that's so offensive about what Trump is saying is he's invoking slavery when he basically is telling these players to like play the game or like to stop, or anyone in that matter who's like telling these players, oh, just play the game, like don't talk, just play.
Right.
Like it's basically invoking the connotation of like the white man who owns these black players.
Yeah.
Who's like basically saying, you can't talk, you can't do anything because we own you.
No doubt.
And I think that's a lot of what these conservatives don't understand is things like structural racism. Like especially with my interactions with conservatives.
Right.
It's just like they do not understand systematic or structural racism.
No, of
Like,
course not.
And
You couldn't be
really
conservative if you understood that. You couldn't be.
No, exactly.
If you, or I should say, I should add another layer to it. You couldn't be conservative if you understood it and want to do something about it. I think that there's people who absolutely understand it, and that's the system they want.
hmm They just can't admit it.
Right. Although more and more of them are admitting it.
Yeah. And like and the thing too that's upsetting about Kaepernick, I'm a Bears fan. I'm not saying we'd have a good team with Kaepernick. We might have won that Falcons game if we had Kaepernick as our quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty clear that he's better than half the quarterbacks who are signed. And yet these white owners who are now getting credited for taking a knee, they're still contributing to the situation because they basically blackballed Kaepernick.
Look, shut the fuck up
So they're
until you
complete
hire
hypocrites.
Kaepernick. That should be the
I
basic
agree.
metric. You give Kaepernick an offer, he's on the field. Okay. Till then, I don't care, because again, as we keep saying, it's been turned into something. It has to do with Trump and being an asshole and all this stuff. It's like the fundamental thing is the guy took an enormous personal risk, exposed himself to endless abuse to highlight the fact that people of color are murdered by police, that they are victims of structural abuse in policing and prisons. And he noted that and took an incredible, brave decision to highlight it. And it isn't a generic thing about solidarity. It isn't a generic, it isn't hashtag resistance. It's a structural demand. Anyways, you're in a pretty loud place there, so I got to run. But thanks for the call, man.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, no problem. Okay, Epish. If you think liberals of the broader left will need to come around and see the fact that what they call cultural red meat bigotry and police occupation does in fact benefit the GOP base, I think that's true. I think the right offers the boss, the landlord, and small business owner quite a lot of material benefit, even if they aren't making $500,000 annually. At least they promise it. There's a good chunk of the electorate when only 50 to 60% of the country is voting. Of course, they have been convinced that militarism, police occupation, and state oppression back up their private property. That's true. And they are right to a certain extent. Yes, I've said this before, but blood and soil for settler colonialism is biological determinism and private property. the alt-right is far from fringe. I agree completely. I think what the alt-right intuits is that if we are going to maintain in a shrinking world of resources, geography, and trade, I think that they, on some level, intuit that if you want to maintain those systems of class hierarchy, of race hierarchy, of privilege, and some of them might not understand what their actual position is in that hierarchy with regards to class. But certainly like someone like Spencer has all of the privilege points across the board. He's an asshole white trust fund baby. But I think that they correctly intuit on some level, and it might not be this specific fantasy of an ethno-state, but that apartheid-like systems are going to be necessary if you want to perpetuate those systems of inequity in the present and future circumstance. That's what, Achille Mbembe, who's one of the most influential philosophers right now, when he wrote about the death of liberal democracy from a leftist perspective, saying, look, we can critique liberal, conventional, constitutional liberal democracy for its limits and what it fails to cover. But just as in the 70s, when the left was attacking the social welfare state from the left, and then by the 80s, it was completely under assault, and the left needed to shift its position to protect those basic gains, not push them in a more radical direction. I think in some ways now that is part of the strategy, is preserving those norms and some of those protections. And I think that they, as I say, they recognize that next layer of repression and codifying those systems, it's going to take another wave of brutality. And not that it hasn't been brutal for decades. And if you read Nancy MacLean, Democracy in Chains, yeah, it's a different flavor. But what have people like the Koch's been dumping endless amounts of money and resources into for decades to structurally limit democracy in a way that absolutely disproportionately affects people of color and systemically screens out anybody of less than wealth from any type of real democratic participation? Disco Stew, MR Crew, do you get the feeling that Roy Moore's win is a harbinger of the 2018 candidates? Because I do. Also, the report in Wisconsin of voter suppression is a huge red flag for what's coming. Can we count on free and fair elections? I'm not so sure. I think we already can't count on free and fair elections. You look at Ari Berman's work, you look at the Supreme Court overturning the Voting Rights Act, there is a national war on the right to vote of people of color by the Republican Party. Simple. And I'm not saying, I'm not going to get into the Russia thing. There's legitimate stories about Russia. Investigate it, great, whatever. Not remotely as important as the suppression of votes of people of color as a overt electoral tactic and strategy of a modern white supremacist party. We're going to add to that, Matt?
No, sorry.
Speaking of which, and excuse me, I would probably end a bit early. I'm not feeling great, but let's get to Roy Moore. Roy Moore. First, let's start with number 4. When you talk about this next wave of 2008 candidates, and I remember Roy Moore from like college and the Bush era. In some ways, he's a throwback. Because there's been a little bit less kind of like fake Jesus talk in the Trump age, at least nationally. Roy Moore, of course, was thrown off of the Alabama Supreme Court. He has insane ideas about Sharia. He thinks that Christianity should essentially be a state religion. And he defeated Luther Strange, Loser Luther, which is my new nickname for him, and I don't even remember supporting him. He beat Luther Strange in the Alabama Senate primary, and apparently Luther Strange ran some very misleading ads about Roy Moore and guns. And Roy Moore, with the help of this visual, he's wearing a cowboy hat, and watch what he pulls out of his pocket at this particular moment in this speech on his election night victory.
nearly 3 months of negative ads that we couldn't answer with money because we didn't have it. Ads that were completely false. That I don't believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the Second Amendment.
When he said he believed in the Second Amendment, he pulled out a pistol, and the crowd cheered. Okay. What the fuck, man? Then Roy Moore was asked in an interview later in a post-victory press conference in Montgomery, Alabama, his willingness to work with Donald Trump after Trump threw his support behind his opponent, Luther Strange.
Together we can make America great. We can support the president. Don't let anybody in the press think that because he supported my opponent that I do not support him and support his agenda. As long as it's constitutional, as long as it advances our society, our culture, our country, I will be supportive. As long as it's constitutional. But we have to return the knowledge of God and the Constitution of the United States to the United States Congress.
Like if mainstream Republicans are Al-Qaeda, this guy's ISIS. And definitely a true crazy guy, a real believer. I think Donald Trump is indicating an openness to Roy Moore because he did something pretty interesting. He did the type of thing that if we were spitballing a routine this morning in the office, we might be like, that's a little too on the nose. It's always the case with Trump. Every time you think of a joke and you say, that's a little too on the nose, he goes and does it himself. So this is from a report in the New York Times. Trump deletes tweets supporting Luther Strange. After enthusiastically endorsing an Alabama senator's campaign for re-election, President Trump distanced himself on Tuesday night after the candidates lost in the most Trumpian way possible. He deleted his supportive tweets. Hours after Senator Luther Strange, a Republican from Alabama, lost in Tuesday's primary runoff, Mr. Trump excised at least 3 favorable posts, including one sent Tuesday morning. That tweet, posted as the polls in Alabama opened, the president boasted that Mr. Strange has been shooting up in the Alabama polls since my endorsement.
Yeah, I see what Nate Silver's saying about him.
Yeah, look at what Nate Silver's feeling. Very optimistic. Mr. Strange, who was appointed to the Senate earlier this year after Jeff Sessions vacated his seat to become Attorney General under Mr. Trump, conceded on Tuesday night to Roy Moore, a former Alabama Supreme Court justice whose candidacy was opposed by leading establishment Republicans. The deleted tweets were archived by ProPublica, a nonprofit journalism website, but are no longer on public on Twitter, feeding into an intriguing legal debate about whether Mr. Trump is breaking the law when he expunges his tweets. And then, of course, Trump tweeted out yesterday, "Congratulations to Roy Moore on his Republican primary win in Alabama. Luther Strange started way back and ran a good race. Roy, win in December." That was the unity tweet, and then the next phase will be like, "Loser Luther," that's what I called him.
Tall freak.
What a tall freak of nature. Guy's name's like a comic book villain. I don't know him. So 0.1 for Bannon, Gorka, and Palin, and 0.0 for Trump.
No, I would just disagree a bit with Trump's punditry. To say that Luther Strange started from way behind when he's in fact the sitting.
He was a sitting U.S.
junior
senator. I don't know what the polling looked like, but I certainly always thought that Roy Moore was going to crush it. Dissonant peasant. Well, I had the entire crew on the post-game Michael Brooks show cracking up simultaneously last night, including the world-famous at Cushbomb. I may have peaked way too early, but here we are. But we here at the league are going to keep up the fight. Y'all stay dissonant, serfs. Kolodak, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Nietzsche was an assassin. Bullprog, have you read Nothing is True and Everything is Possible? Seems like a good way to brush up with the latest news of Trump, Sanders, and Stein ads and troll farms across the political spectrum.
That's the Peter Pomerantsev book on Russia. My take on that book is I prefer Karen Dawishaw's Putin's Kleptocracy. The Pomerantsev book is well written, but there's a certain aspect to it where it feels like, you know, he describes, for instance, like attractive young women in Russia chasing after Forbeses and attractive men, and it's like, holy, look at this decadent society, and you realize you could describe
write
America
the same thing about
a whole bunch of that book. It's like, yeah, that's what a sort of oligarchic,
incestuous oligarchy, corrupt relationships between corporations and government, insane PR cultures.
I don't know what the orientalizing of Russia would be called, but that's what it sort of feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying, I agree with you. I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, and obviously there are far less kind of institutional norms and protections in Russia, and Putin is absolutely a next-level authoritarian leader, and it's a terrible human rights situation, and Russia also projects its foreign policy in a terrible way. But I agree. I think that there is a hype and a fixation, and whatever Russia entilism or whatever we're going to call it is absolutely also very real and very problematic. Teacher BB, hi Michael, the discussion of Nietzsche puts me in the mind of the way of the rights and uses of Adam Smith. He was a very subtle thinker, and his theory of moral sentiments emphasizes the importance of compassion, right? His comments on the dangerous impact of division of labor and numerous other points show that he was emphatically not a market fundamentalist. Not at all.
Yeah, totally. In the Hacker and Pearson book on the mixed economy, American Amnesia, it goes into that pretty concisely.
Attorney Andrew, great talk on Nietzsche today, Mike. I would suggest that if you want to go further, reading the article essay on Truth and the Lie and the Extra Moral Sense is a pretty good writing, and you can find it just in Google if you want to read about Nietzsche, but fancy yourself more wine and drinker than beer. Read Deleuze, Nietzsche, and Philosophy. It's a pretty clear, illuminating read. Deleuze and Deleuze. I never know how to pronounce those guys.
Is it Guattari?
No.
Deleuze and, those guys, I've never really totally understood a lot of those French guys.
Yeah, neither have I. Petrus, I'm with them. Harris, Zarathustra, 2020. Together we can climb the mountaintop. When do you think the U.S. was last an actual democracy? Was it ever really? I mean, obviously, I just think in terms of the kind of race and class dynamic barriers. I mean, it's always been. Certainly for legally and overtly since till at least the 1960s, definitely not a full democracy. Obviously, I think actual democracy. I don't know.
I think it's a more useful way to approach this, not as whether it fits a definition of this is a democracy, as opposed to in place of that, look at where does democratic force come to bear on the system.
Right.
And from that perspective, like even the original constitutional government, like we had Ganesh Sitaraman on talking about that as a middle class constitution, and it was based on the idea that there wasn't massive like aristocracies and stuff. So and they thought of that as democracy, right? So we wouldn't think of it like that. But if you identify where democracy is as opposed to what specifically it is, you can work on sort of building it out from where it actually exists.
Yeah, that's perfect. You're calling from a 215 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Michael. It's Mindy.
Hey, Mindy. How are you doing?
Good. I'm good. I wanted to say you really moved me a little bit today. I loved your outrage you have on Trump because I feel the same way you do, and I'm sure a lot of people, I'm sure zillions of people do, but nobody talks about it. Like they don't, like nobody's freaking out. I mean, they're freaking out, but nobody's like passionate about it. And then you go and you like go on TV and you listen to like all the news people on TV, and they're like trying to rationalize it. Like they're trying to have a normal conversation about him. Like, well, he probably, it was premeditated, and nothing's fucking premeditated with the guy. The guy's crazy.
And well, and even if it is premeditated, fuck him. I mean, that makes no difference on my feelings. He's even worse. Fuck him. He's terrible.
I
Premeditated
mean,
or
he's
not.
right. He's not a smart guy.
Right.
He's a trust fund baby. He failed at everything. He would have probably 20 times the amount of money if he just took his father's money and never did anything with it and just collected interest on it. He'd probably have more money than he has now. Don't you think?
Oh, definitely. That's been
I think
proven.
that
I don't know.
at least the same or
at least the
or
same
more.
or slightly more. It's been shown. Someone did
I
some.
mean, he's
yeah. Yes.
Yeah, he's just such a loser. He's so gross. And then the whole thing with Sunday, with the football on Friday. I mean, why did somebody not say to him, it's not about race, it's about police brutality, period, end of story, shut the fuck up, go back in the corner, don't talk, we don't want to hear your opinion on it. And just nobody would have reacted to it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, part of power is you get to decide what means what.
Yeah, that's right. And
I don't know. My brother-in-law's crazy, and when he talks, we just all laugh at him, and we don't continue.
He's not president.
Dating him.
You didn't put him in charge of your family budget, though.
No, right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right.
But I mean, I just think that some of it, as time goes on, we're so exhausted from the whole process that I think a lot of us are just kind of dealing with it, normalizing it, and they're just losing their momentum to be so crazed about it because there's so many balls in the air at the same time. You have the NFL, and then you have Russia, and then you have Graham Cassidy, and then you have the Koch brothers, and everything else going on. That there's just so much. When Obama was president, I mean, I've been a political junkie, basically my whole life, but when he was president, you tuned in maybe once, somebody like me. I tuned in once or twice a week. There was nothing going on. I mean, there was nothing, everything was moving right. The right didn't like what was going on, but at least we weren't, retarded at, we weren't doing it wrong. They just didn't like our agenda, but at least we were doing, everything right through the agenda that they didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, it's he's in our sports, and he's in our TV, and he's in our morning and our afternoon and our evening, and he's just everywhere. You just can't get away from him.
Well, I would suggest, I mean, look, I think that I'm into the outrage. I refuse to let him, make me crazy or whatever. And I think that actually, I that's where we can not indulge him in that way. But I also think that maybe, hopefully, in the long term, this is an opportunity. Once, hopefully, we've exited this specific emergency with this fucking moron. That the truth of the matter is that even in times that seem a lot calmer and are better, and obviously Obama's infinitely better than Trump, there's still a lot of bad things happening, and still a lot of things that we needed to be on top of. Whether it's Wall Street owning the economy, whether it's the Koch brothers chinking away at the courts and rolling back voting rights, whether it's also the fact that nobody's gotten a serious, grip around the climate crisis. There's a lot that we kind of need to stay on. So I hope that, as we use this as an opportunity to not just be oh, okay, maybe he finally ate one too many burgers or whatever and is finally gone or whatever, or he lost, or he had a temper tantrum, whatever it is, that people will say, yeah, we actually got to stay on top of it, even when we don't have, a deranged racist narcissist as president.
Right, people are telling us what's going on with voter rights and all,
Yes.
Jeff Sessions is
I mean,
doing
I think
all that
exactly.
stuff.
I think the right wing.
It's made people much more aware. I'm sorry, Matt. I'm sorry. Go on.
I was just gonna say, I think the right very consciously knows that it uses up people's bandwidth on this shit.
Yep.
I think that's part of Alex Jones's purpose, just send people down rabbit holes. Because the fact of the matter is, and I always remember this because this is our job and we get paid to follow this stuff. But most people are working some job where they can't, be searching the news all day and checking that stuff, and they want to, take time off after work because you're tired.
Yeah, exactly.
So people only have a sliver of time that they can actually devote to informing themselves about this stuff. So part of it, the left needs to go down to a 30-hour work week or some shit.
Without a doubt.
Because we need to raise the bandwidth for people and we need to use it better. But yeah,
no, it's there's a conscious strategy of, if you devastate and destroy and attack public education, you don't have people, what do I always say the Republican agenda is? Dumber, poorer, sicker. Dumber, poorer, and sicker doesn't, just literally you have less time to be a public actor. And the right does not want people to be public actors because they basically want, to the extent there's public participation, to have it be a bunch of, enraged, dumb white people, chasing the flashing light of dumb, fake controversies and identity. And then when actual business is getting done, it's like Mitt Romney. It should be done in quiet rooms.
Let's bankrupt the KB Toys today.
He actually said one time, he said something to the effect of, like, if we're going to talk about inequality, it should be done in quiet rooms. So,
right.
there
like
exactly
they want to get
is.
rid of
Yes.
all. Right, like the Koch brothers, they would like to get rid of all the Democratic, poor, whatever. They want to get rid of everybody that's not them, right?
Yes.
Is that what they want to do?
They want to use everybody as a giant labor source at best and make people who are not economically useful to them basically just get phased out quickly. I mean, that's just the reality.
How are they going to get richer, Michael? This is the part I don't understand. How are they going to get richer? Okay, so they're taking everybody out of the workforce.
Yes. They don't see it like that.
They're going to take everybody out of the... Well, how do they say? You don't see it like that?
Well, I don't see it like that, but I think that I was just at a conference on a... Actually, I shouldn't. I got to be careful what I... Anyways, there's a marketing thing that people talk about a barbell economy, right? And people can describing it either objectively or subjectively, but it's true right now. If you look even in consumer goods in the brand world, what category is dying? A company like the Gap, right? Why? Right. Because it's a little bit too expensive for somebody who really doesn't have money to afford. And it's absolutely beneath somebody who's in a luxury market, doesn't worry about, they'll spend extravagant money if they're interested in clothes, right?
Right,
So
Macy's and then...
or Bergdorf's or Lehman Marcus or whatever, exactly.
Right. Gotcha.
So they talk about a barbell economy where the only sectors that are growing are dollar stores and serious, massive luxury. So if you look at the Koch brothers, their money's in petrochemicals. I think they also own Winn-Dixie cups and stuff like that. They are never going to not make money on government subsidized, petrochemicals and the other, products like that and gas exploration and then really cheap home consumer goods. They have an infinite elastic market of people who are spending at that poor end of the barbell. And then they personally just want more money to be given to them to consume and give to their family and win social favor by, throwing money in the Natural History Museum. I think that some people in the elite, and I think it's a different thing. I just want massive wealth reclaimed because that's my politics. But some people in the more democratic part of the elite, they have some of your concern a little bit. They may say, wait a second, you're completely destroying the middle class. So people can't afford to spend. That's going to hurt a middle-class economy. People like the Koch brothers are like, even if you could spend only at the dollar store, you're still spending, still buying my product.
Right.
What do I care?
Right, Michael.
So there it is.
But they're going to... but then everyone we're going to become like Brazil.
Yes, that's what they want.
Brazil
that's what they want.
Well, so then you have to live behind your gate. So
yes, that's what they want. They already do.
If you don't have a pool... If you don't have a pool and a tennis court and a baseball field and a basketball court and, a shopping center inside your development, right, where you live, then you can't, basically do those things because if you go outside your gate to even get your mail, there's going to be 50 people, poor people, lined up trying to get a piece of you.
That's what they want. That's what they want. And that's already the world. That's
me.
already the world many of them live in. Because they're sociopaths and they believe in a dangerous, destructive market.
This will be instructive.
Yeah.
So I made a.
I'll shut up for a minute. Explain it to me. Just explain, because this is freaking me out.
So I have I made as some people know, I do mixes of Nixon tapes with electronic music, and I recently did one where it's LBJ talking with George Smathers, a Florida congressman, about passing Medicare. And they're talking about, this is in the context of the run-up to the election against Barry Goldwater, who is basically what the Republicans are now. And
I'm old, Matt. I know.
Yeah. Okay. And so the Smathers is telling LBJ about how the businessmen and specifically a grocery store owner of I think Winn-Dixie or some southern grocery store is saying we can't we can't just stop basically Keynesianism and a lot of it is like. I can't remember specifically the policies that Goldwater wanted to do, but it was similar to Trump. Like he wanted to, it would hurt manufacturers. And basically, the point is, Smather says the grocery store owner told him we can't get to a point where everyone's saving and no one's spending, because that's going to kill us.
Because that's a middle class. That's a company whose model relies. But anyway, play it.
But yeah, but I can't. It's kind of a longer thing, but
fine.
I don't want to play it. But
okay.
I'll just put it on screen for people if they want to reference later.
Cool.
But and the point is, Goldwater and his right wing crazies didn't. It's a elite split. What we're experiencing right now is not the people split. This is the different brands of the elites, like the Koch brother types and the liberal types. And I think the Koch brother types are just more honest about. How they need to maintain their property relations, frankly, and that's what makes them scary. But this has always been there, and this is what the right wants. They don't care about maintaining an economy that makes everyone prosperous. They want their money.
They want their money, period. And I think, and that's another reason why people like us, and I do think younger people generally, but also people with a certain kind of politics. That's another reason that the Bernie thing was so important, was because he was the first politician in modern politics. Of course, look, Hillary Clinton's politics of we as an elite should soften the blows on people and give them some opportunities to progress is absolutely better than we should rob everybody of everything and then shoot them on the street and live in a feudal system from like Brazil, 19th century Spain. I mean, American South. I mean, whatever. I mean, America's long been a feudal aristocracy in many respects, right? But sure, Brazil in the 1950s, except with iPhones, exactly. But what Bernie was saying, and a whole other politics that's opening up, and ultimately will be the only thing that saves democracy, is people just saying no. There is no basis upon which any of these people, whether they're well-intentioned or not, should ever occupy this level of economic and political influence. It's undemocratic, it's dysfunctional, it's innately corrupt, and it's innately dangerous to the well-being of the vast majority of the world. And the way to do that is to reclaim wealth and give it back in terms of massive social safety systems, but also just more people having more money. And that's not wealth redistribution, it's wealth claiming, because these people have been robbing for generations.
Right, no, I understand all that, but then you get somebody like Bill Cassidy and Mo Brooks and all these schlubs. They're not rich, right?
They're just rich? They're the bagmen of. They're the bagmen.
They're vassals, right?
They're vassals, and they're making.
Yeah, just imagine
they make a good living carrying water for those people.
If Bill Cassidy didn't do it, they'd find somebody else. Yeah. Some other guy that
so Bill Cassidy so Bill Cassidy's ultimate goal is to be like the Koch brothers' valet?
I don't know, but that's basically what he is as a senator, in my opinion. I don't know what his ultimate goal is. Yes, basically.
I mean, unless you're Darrell Isis, who could dance with those people, I'm sure there's a lot of them that are extremely rich. Paul Ryan probably is not that rich. They're not like mega 1%ers, none of them really, are they?
No, well, a lot of them actually probably are 1%ers.
I mean, they'll have the opportunity to cash out.
Yeah, they'll have an opportunity to cash out. I mean, that's what almost all of them do.
So they want to live like on the grounds of the Koch brothers, like that's going to be like their
they're
goal.
courtiers, yeah,
they're courtiers, exactly. Yes.
Okay, that sums it up a little bit. I don't understand that. I don't know why. I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania, and I went to Texas a couple years ago, and I saw in Texas, like, all the developments were behind gates, and I just couldn't get my...
That's
10 years ago.
That's the model. It's a gated
world.
world.
I couldn't wrap my head around it. I felt like it was, like, not in the right world.
Yeah, look up Peter Thiel wanting to do sea colonies. That's what they want.
That's what they want.
Right. Like, there's $1 million homes, $2 million homes around me. There's no gates here where I live.
But you know what's going to be fun is when we storm all those things and party in them once the revolution comes.
That's exactly right. Yeah, right? We're going to have a great time partying. Thank you, Mindy. I hope you'll check out my new show.
I know. Go. Goodbye. I will. You know, what time is it on? I'm sorry.
It's on 7 p.m. on Tuesdays. On YouTube.
7 p.m. I just had my knee replaced. My other knee
replaced. Don't worry, of course.
All right. No, I'll do it. I'm kind of.
And I hope you become a patron because I want you to call into that show.
I will become a patron.
That's my actual
interest. I'll do it today. Your guy, your manager, what's the guy? Tweeted me.
David, yes.
David, yeah, and he made me feel bad. So
okay.
I'll go ahead.
Oh, good.
No,
Sounds
I don't
good.
mean bad. I'll go ahead. And he made me remind me that I have to do it. I have to do it. I
No,
will
take
do
your
it.
time, recover. Thank you as always for the call.
Thanks for clearing it up. I'm just really, I'm like, my husband's ready to kill me. All right, goodbye.
Oh, well, tell him to
stay safe.
Yeah,
No,
stay safe.
because I'm so wrapped up in this hate that I have for him. That,
For your husband.
It just like,
No, I'm just kidding.
I would just recommend take a break from the Trump stuff and dive into like some deep, like I don't know, some Reagan or Nixon. Or something.
read like Nixon. Read like Nixon Land or Dark Money or something like that. That'll give you a whole history for all this.
Yeah, well, I'm watching Ozark. Did you watch Ozark?
I did. I don't think that's a mood elevator.
No, it's not. Well, then there's also Catastrophe. Did you see that one?
I didn't see that one.
That one's the British.
I know about
comedy.
That one. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that one's really good. So I'll get myself involved, and now I'm watching The Sinner. I like all that dark stuff. But so I'm trying to like get myself like away from it, and I'm trying to hang out.
When you
with my
join the
girlfriends
new
more.
show, I'll give you a meditation tutorial. Thank you, Mindy.
Absolutely, thank
All
you.
right.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye-bye. I think we actually covered a lot of really good ground there. You're calling from an 831 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Michael, how are you?
Hey, what's going on? What's your name again?
My name's Crystal. I'm calling from Santa Cruz. And
what's going on?
Let me take a... And Colin Kaepernick is not a hero. He's a scumbag who should be deported to Red China. He's not good enough to play in the NFL. That's why he doesn't have a job. He's not patriotic enough to be allowed to stay in America. You might call it white identity politics. We call it loving America, pal. The real America. And 7 p.m. on Tuesdays, I'll remember to be busy doing something else every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Okay? Every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, I'll be very busy doing something else. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks a million.
I'm glad you took my call.
Yeah.
It seems like all your calls come from liberals like you. They disagree with you on everything. They disagree with everything you say. Now, I actually disagree with you on pretty much everything you say. It's because you manipulate the facts to fit your narrative. Okay? I'm a little nervous here, so
yeah, that's what we do.
I'd appreciate it if you just hear me out.
Yeah,
okay?
sure.
If you could just hear my argument I'm going to make, all right? Because it really seems like you've surrounded yourself with psychopaths who just reinforce your beliefs, and you have this liberal echo chamber, all your guests, all your viewers, Stan, and super producer Matt.
Speaking of echo, it sounds like you're kind of repeating yourself a little bit here. Can you get to your point?
Okay, well, hang on. You just never hear any alternative points of view. Okay?
All right.
The Nation of Islam Obama is not funny.
Oh, all right. Now,
It's real.
click. It's not funny. It's real. All right. Well, I know it's real.
Obama is a Muslim terrorist born in Kenya, not in Hawaii.
Allahu Akbar.
Have you studied the fake birth certificate?
Thanks for the
It's
call,
Photoshop,
man. Thanks for the call, man. Call it again soon. I need more alternative perspectives. Thanks, man.
Hang on.
No, I mean...
Those are very quick alternative perspectives.
Yeah, was it? You're calling from a 203 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon. This is my name's Jay. I call this show sometimes.
Hey, Jay, what's going
Oh,
on?
you know what didn't get mentioned on your program is a pet peeve of mine is Maggie Haberman, who's the White House correspondent for the New York Times.
Oh, she's pretty bad. Yeah.
She gets, she does, well, no, I would say she's very savvy, and I think as a functionary for the status quo, she's very effective.
Did you like when she said Jane Sanders went to Joe Arpaio's prison?
Well, yeah, and she is also a practitioner of disingenuous reportage like that. And yesterday she got called out by Nate Silver of 538, who, of course, used to work at the New York Times. And he called her out and said that maybe she should, he implied, he didn't name her, he suggested that she account for her overly enthusiastic reporting of Hillary Clinton's emails before, during, and after the election.
Right.
And Miss Haberman rather tartly turned around and made a seventh grade kind of smear or swipe at Nate Silver on Twitter right after that, calling him a troll who was attacking his former employer.
Wow. She seems a little sensitive to that criticism.
Well, and this is the thing is you'd think she's been thoroughly called out, but she is in that special zone where most of Washington journalists dwell, which is sort of being aware on one level that what they're doing is fraudulent, but on the other hand, seeing their mission as being so important, propping up the status quo, whatever the hell it is on a given day, and fighting tooth and nail to make it work, at least appear to work. And but she is the exemplar. And yesterday, I thought that was pretty bold on her part to take on Nate Silver like that, especially when he was sort of doing a mea culpa.
Oh yeah, and also when he's he's not at all a alternative or controversial or remotely radical figure.
He's part of Chapo, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Because, yeah. No, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, but my if I was going to do psychobabble, I would say that, maybe there's some, I think for all of the kind of those types who, I mean, I don't know how Maggie Haberman voted, but I would feel comfortable assuming that she voted for Hillary Clinton. I think for those types of quote unquote liberal media who spend all this, incredible energy and resources proving that they're not biased in that very kind of old and stupid sense of how that conversation plays out, not in terms of structural bias towards status quo or capital, but really in this, the D versus R game, and that they're going to show everybody that they're not carrying water for the Clintons, even though they probably feel quite politically comfortable with a kind of center-right candidate like Hillary, that they spent that amount of time on that bullshit story, and that played a role in the catastrophe we're in right now. I would guess that I'm sure she doesn't like to be reminded of, let alone by Nate Silver.
But she's doing the work every day, though, of making Trump seem like, well, he's not a complete deranged psychopath.
Yep, that's her job. That's the game. Yep.
That's how she gets scoops.
Well,
that's how she gets scoops.
Indeed, she gets scoops, and some of them, like the last time she had an interview with him, it really took off for like a week. But she gets, basically a daily byline on the front page of the biggest newspaper in the world at this point. She and another example, she's like sort of the crowning example of what they do at NPR, which is, we're not liberal. Here's the proof.
Right, exactly.
And well, thank goodness you guys don't do that as much. I know that you were spending a lot of time on Luther Strange, and I hate to think why that is, but it could be that it's just good old-fashioned shoe leather reporting. I'm not going to accuse you of anything, obviously. I don't want you backbiting me on Twitter.
Okay. Well, I can Well, Nook, you're good with me now, Jay. So no backbiting.
Matt, though, can hold a grudge.
Matt can hold. Matt, I'm much more explosive than Matt, but I'm a little bit more forgiving. I'm like Escobar. Matt's like Cali Cartel. I'm kind of like in the moment, everybody needs to die, but maybe I'll breathe about it a little bit. Matt's more like sit on the scotch.
I light the fuse before I've even constructed the bomb.
Right. Exactly.
It's a long one.
Thanks, Jay.
Well, Matt is the personality that explains how Coen Brothers movies are created. I think it's there beneath the permafrost. It's just there waiting to be dug up.
That's really good. All right, thanks, man. Bye. That's funny. You're calling from a 916 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Cesar in Oakland.
Sorry, what was that?
This is Cesar in Oakland.
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing much. I just wanted to sort of maybe give a possible alternative answer to a question Mindy had, which is why do congressmen, do what they do? And I think you're right about it being in their self-interest ultimately and them ultimately cashing out. I also think it's really important, and that like these people really also believe what they're saying.
Yeah,
that
some
in
of them are
order
true
to
believers, for
justify-
sure. Yep, totally. No doubt.
I think even in order to justify their self-interest, though, you have to kind of rationalize it over a long period of time against enormous amounts of evidence and counter arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone like Paul Ryan, especially, like he's a genuine, true believer, and the Koch brothers are too. It
Right.
also is in their self-interest, and that's why they believe all of these things. But we shouldn't underestimate that aspect of it either.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. Thanks for the call, man.
Thank you.
All right, we have 2 more calls, and then we're going to be on our way. You're calling from a 204 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, you guys. It's Arthur calling from Winnipeg.
Hey, Arthur, what's going on?
Well, I'm sorry for calling back, and Sam's not here, but I wanted to follow up on my phone call with Sam last week about issues with the lack of support or the resistance to Bernie Sanders among, I perceive it to be people of color who support the Democratic Party, and I thought Sam just kind of dismissed it last week. And I wondered if you guys feel the way Sam does, that people would just forget it and come together for the next election. I
can't speak. I mean, in a general election, I think there will be definitely a coalescing for whoever the nominee is. I think the next primary could. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with a competitive, seriously contested primary. That's a good thing. It would be a shame if it would be a shame if it turns into, more of this kind of bullshit that we're still living out from 2016. But I think and I don't want to, it's tricky when I'll say what I think Sam was indicating, and it's certainly what I think, which is that I do think that in general, if you look at the numbers, I mean, certainly from the Bernie side, we got to keep going over this. Most Bernie voters voted for Hillary Clinton, including, a Bernie voter like me, who really has genuine substantive problems with Hillary Clinton. And I think that on the flip side, Bernie actually in polls is pretty popular across the board with any type of non-conservative voter, including most Democrats. And a lot of Democrats are people of color. And when you go, by the way, also on younger numbers, people under 40, people under 35, I mean, just as in the primary, he's overwhelmingly popular. So I do think that because I remember last week when you called about it, you kind of referenced some media personalities. I just think that those voices are important the way that, our voices can be, in the sense that it does have some role in sort of shaping certain kind of aspects of opinion and facilitating certain conversations. But I would just not take that as any type of actual broad representation of a real electorate. It's just not borne out by the numbers, and it's just not borne out, I think, certainly by the time. I mean, I could tell you from my end, and I think it's very important to not allow Trump to degrade our standards, and I think that having a real left candidate is immensely important. But I'll lay the marker down right now. In 2020, in a general election, I will vote for Cory Booker over Donald Trump. I will vote for, God forbid, Andrew Cuomo, right? And I think that attitude is absolutely on the other side. And you also, by the way, see Bernie, if he does run, he's already positioning himself to speak about and connect those issues far more effectively. So I'm just not terribly worried about it.
Okay, well, I hope you're right. I hope that it's not, first of all, that hard to build a bridge, and that there's not that animosity. It kind of worries me. Listen, I just want to quickly change to an entirely different topic just for a second. I wanted to talk about Justin Trudeau again, because I'm no fan of his.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to just address something you mentioned about labor. It's true that Trudeau's asking for the right to work states to basically drop that, but I think it's really important that people listening to your show know that in Canada, in the last federal election, he ran against the NDP's proposal for $15 minimum federal wage and that every time he's been asked on that issue since, he said he doesn't think it's a good idea. He has no answers regarding the issue of precarious employment. And as a matter of fact, his Minister of Finance, Bill Morneau, has said on more than one occasion that young people in Canada should get used to the idea of precarious employment as a condition of the Canadian labor market. And I just think it's really important for people to understand that Justin Trudeau is not a lefty. He's not a progressive man. He's a corporate. He supports CETA, NAFTA, blah, blah, blah. You know where I'm going to go
Hey,
with this.
Justin Trudeau is terrible, and he is no friend of the Majority Report. Thanks for the call, man.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, you're calling from a 206 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, this is Mark from Arkansas. How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks very much for the show.
You're welcome.
Really like the presentation. Yeah, all
Oh,
right.
thank you.
Hey, look, I called him once before, but I had this incredible lunch with a friend of mine, and I'm in Arkansas at the moment, which used to be a blue state, and it's currently a red state, and it's kind of like in the area of the Bible Belt, too. So, I don't want to get Christian or anything like that, but I had this incredible lunch with a friend of mine, and this was a real shock. So we started talking about the problems that they've got in Venezuela at the moment, the price control and the fact that some bakeries are not allowed to, they're only allowed to bake bread or anything like that. And I'd like to get your take on that because it really came as a surprise to me. I'm not sure what's going on in Venezuela, but I can imagine after Chavez died, there's been a bit of a shake-up.
No, I appreciate it. Let me. I'll answer it. I'll answer you off air. Thank you so much for the call. I would say a couple weeks ago I had on Ava Gollinger on the show, and she's someone who is, she worked with Chavez, and she's pretty sympathetic to that project. There's a whole bunch of things happening there. There's some real economic mismanagement by the Maduro government and under Chavez. There are corruption issues, there are mismanagement issues, and at the same time, there is an opposition which is dominated by an oligarchy and very far-right forces that have been fighting back tooth and nail from the beginning of any reforms and wealth reclamation in Venezuela. And then, of course, you have the United States interfering there as well in a coup that we backed in 2002. So I think it's one of those scenarios where basically you could point fingers at everybody, and certainly the present Venezuelan government is nothing to idolize or defend. But I think from a perspective of being in the United States, our kind of primary concern needs to be that, we overtly with Trump and Pence are, demanding regime change essentially. And that plays into obviously a long history of backing right-wing juntas and death squads and coups and subverting democratic process in Venezuela and in Latin America in general, of course. But listen back on that interview. I guess we can do these real quickly. I want to just, let's just do the ABC poll. So remember that the whole purpose behind destroying your health insurance, and they will absolutely go for it again, is to work on a massive regressive tax package that Steve Mnuchin, was pretty open about lying about just the other day on CNN. Check out this poll that ABC put together. No normal people support tax cuts for the rich. There is overwhelming support for a middle and lower income tax cut. It's at 78 versus 19%. And this poll is also not, this is just an aggregate of all groups. They didn't break it down. So this is not broken down specifically. I would imagine in subcategories it polls differently. But this is a general poll of Americans. Higher income people deserve a tax cut. 62% opposed, 33% of support. I would say it's pretty obvious who that 33% are. that are still buying into that trickle-down fantasy mythology. Business, 48% support, 45 opposed. That is, I think, also a reflection of many Democrats playing into tropes on corporate tax rates and repatriation. That's a major problem. A tax cut that's framed as progressive for middle and lower incomes, 78%, 19 opposed, by far the most popular one. Okay, let's read these final IMs. Sean Hannity's vape. I was excited to see John Oliver did a show about corporate consolidation, but disappointed about the specific cases he covered. He talked about Jeff Oakley for a decent chunk of it, but completely ignored Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Maybe he didn't want to piss off the owner of the Washington Post, but it could have just overlooked or cut time for Bezos' takeover of markets. One of the biggest business stories right now, isn't it? Thoughts? I didn't see his segment, but of course it is. Thames Darwin, I think it's fundamentally incorrect to call the AFD a fascist party. It's more what we'd call a national conservative party, or a party of reactionaries rather than right revolutionaries. MR member, everyone who's ever been stiffed by Trump should tweet at him to set up a hashtag about his tweet about Puerto Rico not paying their debt. Yes, that's a great idea. Angry. The Michael Brooks show is awesome. Thank you. Why are politicians so unambitious? Is there nobody who wants their names in the history books? It's just an easy way to make money for these people. They don't really care about anything else.
And maybe this is too optimistic, but I think that could come. I mean, not right now, but I mean, there could be a rebalancing in that regard. I mean, I think we're at a historically low point for sort of dignity of these offices.
Right. Colin Doucet, right-wing Mandela. Steven Seagal, alpha male, great fucking guy, and an inspiration for Zeb Gorka is right. Those NFL sons of bitches are outrageous and disgusting. They disrespect the troops and are a sad joke. Globe emoji, globe emoji, globe emoji. Umar Shami. Matt, you were right to be excited about the new Colossus. The review suggests that the cut scenes are near The Last of Us in quality. Best of all, the bigots are pissed off, complaining about, among other things, that it has a strong black woman leading white dudes in the resistance against Nazis. Perfect timing for such a game.
Yep.
Chris Lepaco. Colin Kaepernick is writing a new book of philosophy. It's called Take a Nietzsche. I'm going to have an MR All-Star show right after your show with Dissident Peasant, Reefer Cake, and Twitter troll right-wing Nelson. Reagan couldn't make it, so he's disinvited. He's un-American. Patreon.com/The Experiment. We'll have a link. Anthony from Baltimore, film recommendation, Rat Film. It was a super powerful experimental documentary that connects many threads of Baltimore's history, from the first segregation laws to redlining to the outcomes of those neighborhoods today. A socialite during, I believe, the 1950s, who was a strange, morbid curiosity which would build scale models of forensic schemes from disenfranchised neighborhoods with obsessive details. A charismatic pest control city worker with an intuitive understanding of rent control and its connection to inner city racial inequality. The involvement of Rockefellers in developing the Johns Hopkins University. That sounds really interesting. I would watch that. Solidarity with Rojava. Both interviews were great. German guys should just call in again and talk more about German Antifa. I agree. They did invent the black bloc tactic, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that was great. Denver Dave, the oath that American military members and political officials take mentions nothing about a fucking flag or asinine anthem. Ronald Reagan question we should ask: if you owned a small business, would you hire Trump to manage it? And I'm sorry, I'm not getting to all of the books.
A lot of people
today.
Would hire Trump to manage it. That's the sad thing.
I apologize about that. That is true. The final IM of the day. Oh, excuse me. Drumpf's Hands. Good book about the gated community dystopia future. Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. lights are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made.